Hi, everyone. Welcome to Psychology and Spirituality, a Bridge to a Better Life discussion. Yes, we come back on a weekly basis to explore this intersection, as I call it, between psychology and spirituality. And we uncover some nuggets, right? And some pieces of wisdom that can help you, can help, I hope, help me and all of us here to understand and live a better life. My name is Marcia Trajano, and I'm here with Dr. Dennis Assisi, and we're going to talk about courage, but also the underlying topics of courage, which are fear, love, and that silent hero within. So, Dan, it is so good to have you with us again. How are you?
Marcia, it's great to be with you, having a conversation about things that are really important and that matter quite a bit. Big items. We have big beasts to slay today. I don't think that we can fully put a final word on the topic, but I'm excited to engage in some thinking with you around courage. And here's the thing that I think is fascinating for me, and hopefully we're going to talk about this, is courage is something we can develop and we can learn, right? And when I was little, I always thought about like either you had it or you didn't have it, right? It's like a trait, it's a quality, so you can develop it. So I'm excited about joining in on the conversation today.
Yeah. And if I may, Dan, whenever we talk about courage, the hero's journey from Joseph Campbell comes to my mind. And I don't know why, but the mental image that I have of the hero's journey is basically what we've been received in the Old Testament, right? In the David and Goliath, this young
Mhm.
boy meeting and confronting this giant Goliath, and there is always this idea that if there were David against David, then may not be as heroic, or Goliath against Goliath. So it's this idea of heroic acts when there is a disproportionate balance. This is what comes to my mind.
Mhm.
But let's see, what is it? What is this silent hero that we all have? And I want to say before we start proper, then Joanna de Angelis, she tells us that courage dignifies, and I air quote here because it's her words, right? Dignifies and raises the spirit, and it is a virtue equal to the greatest ethical achievements. So I go, whoa, right? It's quite thrilling.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. Let's
the
go into it.
idea,
Let's step into it, right? Yeah. Let's not
right?
mince words here, you know?
So courage, right? She says
Uh-huh.
it's not instinctive. And it goes right to what you said, right? It can be educated if it's not instinctive, but she calls it ethical. What
Yes.
does that really mean to us in your mind?
Ooh, I think that, and this is my main takeaway from Joanna and all the incredible work that she does. I think we should just pause it. If you're listening to this, if you're watching this, and you've heard or seen one of these, she is not shallow, right? She does not stay at the margins. She goes for it. She steps into it. And that's why we love her so much, because she's able to provide insights that it might take us a long, long time to get to. So,
Mhm.
Marcia, what you just said right there, there's so much in there that we can unpack from a definition
Yes.
of courage, of relationship to fear, its relationship to ethics, right?
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think the way I start understanding her
Yeah.
text and her talks about courage is that courage has a lot to do with an alignment to a vision of what you think is right or necessary. There's a wonderful quote, we can pull it out from this chapter. But I
Mhm.
say this to then go into this idea of it's not instinct,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
she warns us in one line or two. She does this so well, sometimes it's even annoying. In one line, she can give us a whole philosophy of life, right? And it's like, by the way, philosophy of life, we like you would think about this for like hours and then you go back to the
Yeah.
next line. She says that I'm going to quote her here, right?
Yeah.
It differs from impetuosity that characterizes the dominance of instinct, demonstrating the magnitude of feelings that do not fear and do not retreat before difficulties. Let's break this down.
Yes.
The way I would paraphrase her and put her in blue jeans is courage is a thing, but there's also fake courage. We sometimes think that our instincts, our impetuosity, this
Yes.
impulsiveness is courage. And she argues that is not courage.
Yeah.
Courage is based when you are aligned with the things that you want and you are aware of them, see their worth, and you work towards it, right?
Hmm.
It's not that you don't have fear, but you're able to work through your fears to do that. Whereas there are moments in which we act out of impulsiveness
Yeah.
because we are scared, we are threatened, we are angry, and that is not of a place of alignment to our true self and our goals, but that is a reaction, right?
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
think that the way I would frame them is she argues, and I love how she expands her thinking, that courage is not reactive. Courage is proactive. It's our ability to tackle difficult things because we think that that which we're tackling will get us to a point that is right, it's beneficial, and is good, right? And
Yes.
so the
Yeah.
impulsiveness sometimes gets misdiagnosed as courage, right? Just because somebody acts out doesn't necessarily mean that they're courageous.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's tons of courage in not acting out, right?
Yes.
And
Yes. The
silencing
silence.
yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So she really leads us to some really deep places of contemplation around what is this thing, courage, and
Mm.
how can I leverage and use that in my life, right? So it has a lot to do with it. And so I think that, and she gives us a couple of different definitions in here. She takes us to Aristotle, right, in this chapter, which
Yeah.
is brilliant in many different ways as she is. I am always in awe of her. And it's one of those things like when you think she's really cool, and then after a while, like, yeah, she's cool. And then you read something else like, no, she's really cool. Um, right, like like you kind of like rediscover Joanna as you read through
Yeah.
things. You think she's great, and then kind of like your parents, you think they're great, and then you grow up like and then you grow up a little bit more like wow, they're even greater than I expected them
Yeah.
that they were.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think
The
that was
superhero,
great.
right?
This is great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
right.
superhero, Joanna de Ângelis, like our kids, at least when they're young, they saw us. Your kids are growing, so I don't know if they still see you as Super Dan.
And they might for a little longer, right? But soon enough, it would change, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I think you talked a little bit already about it. Just to rephrase it or paraphrase you, is the idea that ethics, we could say, law, ethics. There's a lot of classes you can go to, and you say, well, is this a social construct? And it's not. It's as she reflects what you just said, Dan. It's this alignment. And I have to tell you, I know that you have a background and certifications in project management. I am a project manager by profession, and then I am ah, in this is really intensive, several weeks long class as we speak, all day long, talking about
Yeah,
alignment of
yeah,
vision and mission and strategy and goals. And when you start talking about it, says, oh no, I'm back into my class. No, we're talking about courage. We're talking about from a spiritual psychology, if you will, perspective of what is to be courageous. And
yes,
so let's always think, am I aligned with my conduct, my choices, my decisions, using my free will, but am I aligned with my consciousness,
yeah,
with also what we call divine laws, right?
yeah. And
So
purpose and
yeah,
meaning, right?
yeah,
Which we can go so many different
yes,
ways. There is a
yeah.
wonderful sentence. Got a couple from this chapter because her
Mm,
sentences sometimes are poetry, sometimes it's philosophy. And
mhm,
she
yeah.
says, in terms of like defining what it is, she
Mm,
says that there's two that are really good. Well, there's many, but two that really jump at me. She says,
mm,
courage is a byproduct of a specific feeling of love
Yes.
towards that in which we believe, we wish, and we fight for. So the way I break it down is
Yeah.
courage is a byproduct. It is a result of the love we have towards the things that we truly believe in, that we wish for and are willing to fight for. So it
Yeah.
is it courage is what comes from us being aligned to our purpose, to our most noble purpose, and knowing what is it that we believe in, what we want, and we're willing to act on. So
Yeah.
it is an alignment to a greater cause, or it
Yeah.
should be, right?
Yeah.
And it goes on to say something else, which I think you just touched on, Marcia, which is brilliant, which is because courage is that alignment, that byproduct. It says courage unites to reason the emotion. That is to say,
Yeah.
emotion and reason come together in courage, something we believe in, something we know is right, and that's where courage comes from. When those two things come together, it's
Yeah.
not haste or boisterous, producing phenomena of joy and peace. It's about joy and peace. It's not about impulsiveness like you were bringing about. It is not
Yeah.
loud. It is about, hey, I feel this way. I'm aligned with my greater self, my purpose. I know that is the right thing to do, so I must act on it. I
Yeah.
have very
Yeah.
little choice but to act on that which I believe and truly hold to my heart. It's
Yeah.
almost like it comes naturally from that alignment, right? And
Yeah.
for me, the problem is that alignment.
Yeah.
I'm not always clear on what my alignment is to be courageous about, or I lose track of my alignment or what I want
Yeah.
my alignment.
Well, because you have to agree, right? We live in the world of things, our
Mm,
material lives, and the world of things calls us to pay attention to a lot on any given life. So this constant pulling you to accomplish this, achieve that, uh, and achievements in the language of Joanna de Ângelis, something that is highly desirable and encouraged, right? This is all about struggles as we achieve something, but the something thing as a material item is not really uh, it's not non-ephemeral, right? It's temporal, it's ephemeral, it's not permanent. So if we are struggling to achieve out of material aspects of our lives, then it's okay. But it's discounted if you think about it, right? Dan, I don't know if I'm
mm,
making myself clear in those alignment. What is that I'm really supposed to be doing? What
yeah,
is that I'm really supposed to be looking to do, even when it's not so easy? And we know the human brain, and it's not just a human brain, animals as well. We always look for the shortest cut for anything. I remember, I don't know if you know this, Dan, but I was educated in architecture design. I don't know, this is so long ago.
mhm,
And one of the key concepts that we were taught, this is me as a young college student, right, was in designing, let's say, this beautiful, I don't know, a park, Central Park proportion, right?
uh-huh,
And architects, we architects, I'm putting myself as one of them, love curves and this and that, the poetry of forms. And our professors would always say, if you do this, be prepared that people will cross and kill the grass because it takes too long to do
too
all of
long.
this. And it's true. We are wired to go for what is the easiest, fastest way to accomplish something. So,
Yeah,
anyways, back to courage, and that I think it's important for us when we reference alignment, right? It is good to think about what is ethical, because it may be culturally speaking uh, label as not good. So let's not go into the good and evil, good and bad, but according to what is right. And at that point, and especially inserted in many different cultures and aspects of lives that may put you in a situation that it's completely terrible, and you are afraid, and you're facing fear, you face pain, you even face a personal um, loss, right? That's when you really know our courage, right?
Yeah.
How do we
Yeah.
get to that point?
Yeah, and I think that because it helps us refocus, right?
Yeah.
Those moments of challenge help us refocus into what really matters. I think what you
Mhm.
said about the world calling us to different things is very true. I think that the world has a very strong gravity, right? Matter
Mhm.
has gravity. It pulls us away and distract us because we're not yet into the habit of seeing
Mhm.
things at the highest level. We are not fully developed in our spirituality, so it's natural that we gravitate towards that which is close to us. And what's
Yeah.
close to us is everyday life. And so it's easy for us to lose sight. So
Yeah.
that search for what you said, right? Like the aesthetics in architecture, sometimes we lose that because we are just worried about getting from point A to point B because I got to get to my class, I got to go to work. And so,
Yeah.
like, and those moments we fail to see the beauty of the gravitas of the aesthetic sense. And I think that what she calls us to do is to think about how to develop the practice of aligning ourselves to the things that really matter so that we may develop this ethical, moral standard that she
Hmm.
calls us to grow with, right? Because she
Yeah.
makes a point that that courage is a result of a good spiritual guidance, right? So if we have that alignment, and if we model that, if we have shown that to us, if
Yeah.
we model or we get a model like our kids, for instance, right? Then it's great guidance because we are
Yeah.
focusing on that which is important and then acting and moving towards it. But
Yeah.
that is so much more easy to
Yeah.
like hear and talk about than actually do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I want to bring another aspect to it before we move on to a different topic, which is from a psychological perspective, right? And this is bringing Jungian psychology here, but also inspired that spiritist ethics, which is that moral courage is a quality, an attribute of someone who has an integrated personality. And of course, every time you read something like this, you're like, okay, I hear you, Marcia, but what do you really mean? And it simply means, simpler than it may sound, it's just that our ego is no longer ruled by, you know, uh, the enemies in this discussion today: fear, guilt, vanity. But instead, the ego is ruled by this sense of justice, but also love. So on this side, then there are two types, right? One, that psychological immaturity that represents our immature ego, and it's thirsting, right, for pride, for recognition, for anything that feeds my ego, my immature ego. On the other hand, on the other hand, we have the mature self, which is always looking and acting and ruled by love and a sense of duty and those convictions that when we have that purpose that you talked about, then it becomes easier, right? We no longer says, oh, I really don't want to do this, but I should do this, and you end up spending a lot more time than is needed
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
Um, but I think she mentions when she talks about courage, Aristotle, right? Which is some interesting. Do you want to talk about it? This the golden mean that she talks about, or he talked
Yeah.
about?
Yeah, and I think it really interesting because it just shows how tuned in she is to so many different ways of thinking and helps us
Yeah,
extract wisdom from all kinds of ways, right?
yeah,
She making a point in that part of the text about balance in courage, right? And I
Yeah.
think that Aristotle's point with the mean is it's not when it's not a it's not necessarily when we are doing something that is it's how to find a balance between how can I put that into words in a way that it
Mm.
makes sense. um, it's not too much left, not too much right, right?
Yeah, and you mentioned a little bit already, right? When you
Right?
talked about reason and emotion, is that the Buddha would say the middle way, right?
Yeah,
It's
and
right
that's what the
in between.
golden mean is, the right balance between
Yeah,
those two different sides, right?
yeah,
And if we go back to Aristotle and Aristotle's definition
mm,
of excellence, right?
mhm,
It's a habit. He says that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence is not an act, but a habit, right? So you can see how that aligns with Joanna's point of like we can learn to be courageous
yeah,
by aligning ourselves and not letting us fall too much into the emotion and too much onto the reason at the expense of the emotion and vice versa,
yeah,
not too
yeah,
much
yeah,
into action impulsiveness and not too much
yeah,
into
yeah,
inaction.
yeah,
Then we find the middle way, right, which
yeah,
we find in Buddhism and in which she constantly visits too. And I think in that wonderful book of her Optimism, she goes deep into, we
yeah,
find this Aristotelian mean of what courage could be. And then what does courage lead to, right? Because it is a byproduct. Remember, she says it's a byproduct of that alignment, but it is
yeah,
also a tool for us to ethically develop. Because if we
yeah,
know where we're going, that's the target, and I know
yeah,
I'm going to go that way, in the process of moving myself that way, I will face challenges and I
yeah,
will know how to weather the
yeah,
challenges. And in the process, my faith and my feelings will be reassured, they will grow, and I will learn through the act of selflessness, abnegation, whatever it is you want to call, towards the
mhm.
focus that I set. So the golden mean, right, it really is about finding that sweet spot of
I love it.
balance in
Yeah,
lives, right?
yeah,
Which is hard. It is so hard because the world tells us that courage is to be boisterous, is to be loud, and is to
mhm.
be like our society really calls us to be leaders at all time, right? We
Yeah,
need to like charge and show people how it's done, and it really takes us to one extreme without
yeah.
realizing that for us to be great leaders, we have to know how to follow. We have to know
I
how the
love it. Yeah.
works, right?
Yeah,
Because
sorry to
we can't.
interrupt you. It's just you reminded me, and I have to just interrupt because I saw,
Yeah.
oh, Dan, it was many, many years ago, but it was a discussion, a lecture on leadership, but they talked about the art of fellowship.
Yes,
And
because
the
you
example,
have
yeah,
to know how to follow to be able to lead. Like you have to know like what people
exactly.
want and how they will follow you if you really want to make a difference in the world, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and in this lecture, the example is beautiful because there's actually a video of flamenco, and I'm doing this because I'm thinking I'm a flamenco dancer. I'm not, but this whole beauty of that ancestral dance and how one cannot lead, but each one has a role and it's fellowship. But I love what you said. Sorry for the interruption. I just
No, and
the
I think we can I think we
mm,
can bring that back to the integration piece that you were talking about
yeah, yeah,
because the goal is not to extinguish the ego,
yeah,
right? The
correct.
goal is to integrate the ego into the self so
Yes,
that the contribution of the ego doesn't blind the essence of the self and the self can guide the desires of the ego, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
so it's a beautiful, again, a golden mean
yeah,
between things. It's not like, oh, let's kill those things and let's just keep these. No, it's like, how do we bring it all together? Who are we? What
yeah.
do we want? And how do we accept the parts of us that are not there yet? And how do we
Yeah.
transform them as opposed to shunning them and rejecting them, right?
And
I
I would say this is probably, in my opinion, Dan, the biggest act, heroic act of courage, which
yeah,
is to look at yourself and accept all the parts that you don't like about yourself. It takes incredible courage to start and continue to have this path of self-discovery, but
Mhm.
also self-forgiveness, self-love, right? So that you can then embrace who you are in I am in our totality, right?
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I love that. I love that because
yeah.
I think you bring an assumption that we have,
Hmm.
and I don't know that is like a really a thoughtful assumption. If people, I think we just have that. It's not intentional because it's an
Mm.
assumption. That we think that heroes cannot be anonymous, right? That being a hero requires a boisterous, loud approach to things,
Hmm.
whereas what you're describing is being a hero in everyday life to work on your things
Yeah,
anonymous.
yeah,
And that is a
yeah,
cultural, that is a thing that is going against our cultural values of the time, where we
yeah.
think that to be a hero, we have to, again, be full of testosterone and be loud and obnoxious, right?
Oh,
And I
yeah,
think that integration speaks against that, right? It's about
yes, yes,
balancing the anima and the animus. It is going back
yes.
to the whole piece. Is knowing who we are. That can only take place if we're willing to engage, like you said, with these really big questions of who we are, where do we come from, where do we go, what do we want, which is, by the way, almost a definition of spiritism, right?
Yeah,
And what is a relationship to the physical world as a spirits? And so it's really, really big stuff.
yeah. I love it. I really do it. I have a tidbit here to help with the golden mean. May I bring it to
Yeah,
you?
please, please. Uh-huh.
And I'm gonna say I'm gonna sound really smart. I am not.
You are, you are.
But the neuroscience supports that too, and how. And when we act with courage, the prefrontal cortex, the reasoning center, actually modulates the amygdala, our fear center. Ah, so even that is good. I may be super afraid, and I have to tell you, the moments of the biggest fears in my life was when I became a mother. Right?
Hmm.
There's so many unknowns, and there's so much fear, but we are immersed in the idea of love, and that helps us, right? But it's fear and courage at the same time. It's that dance of the golden mean that Aristotle brought to us, right? How does this, Dan, connect, because you brought up spiritism, with the idea from the Spirit's book? I believe it's question 932 that says, good people are timid because they fear the struggle. Do you have any thoughts about that idea of more courage that is necessary, and what is needed perhaps for transforming our faith, which is a thought, a feeling, into an expression of that faith, which would be action. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the connections, right? Because if we try to make a parallel, we might not be successful, but we're going to try. Is as you're talking about the frontal cortex and the
Ah,
amygdala, right?
okay, yeah,
So we know that our physical bodies have developed so that the back of our brain to the front, and so the amygdala, the amygdala, and the feelings and the regulation of feelings came first, and the frontal cortex, which is the front part of our brain, the reasoning, the cause and consequence, comes later in our evolutionary process, which is
yeah,
a beautiful symbolism of how first we get our feelings, big feelings, then we learn to slowly rationalize, understand them, but we got to connect them, like you're saying, right?
yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah,
wonder if that connection is not what we're trying to do with spiritism, and at the same time with this idea of hero-ness and courage, right? Being calm and anonymous leaders, right? Because if that question holds true and the good is timid, right? Why is it that
Yeah.
we don't see more good in the world? The Spirit's book tells us because
Yeah.
goodness is timid. And
Yeah.
so there
Yeah.
is a lot of wonderful things out there. You just don't see it. You don't see great acts of selflessness being broadcast because they are not meant for that. They're meant for others. Is when somebody helps an old lady cross the street, proverbially speaking, they don't go out afterwards and say, and they shout, "Yeah, did you see what I just did right there? Did you see that was me, all me, by myself?" Right?
Uh-huh.
But selfishness does do that, right? Because selfishness
Yeah.
needs that attention. And so I think what Spiritism leads us to understand is as we embark on this journey that you have been talking about and that is
Yeah.
being featured on this program about integration, individuation, this shift towards an alignment with your higher self,
Hmm.
you start to worry a little bit less about how much recognition you get into the world or from
Yeah.
the world, say,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
worry more about, am I doing the things that I think I ought to do, whether they are looking at it or not?
Yeah.
Perhaps the true measure of virtue is that when you do something that is right when nobody's looking, that
Yes.
is like, oh, I think this is important to me, right? And so I think what you're talking about is this transformation that takes place or should take place or will take place, and all of the above is starting to find place in our hearts. And we begin to see that the world is pretty loud out there,
Yeah.
but that doesn't matter much. Because if my world in here is tame, if I'm beginning to change my inner world, right? If I'm calming the storm within, not the storm without,
Yeah.
then that is what matters. The storm outside is a reflection of the individual storms inside, right? We
Yeah.
can't fix the
Yeah.
problems outside if we are
Yeah.
not first fixing the challenges inside. And we're going through our own journey,
Yeah.
facing our challenges, the hero's
Yeah.
journey, the individuation process, spiritual evolution. What do you want to call it? Like there's so many different names to this beautiful thing, right? But so I think that is a remembrance that you bring to us that the focus, the arena of our actions should be internal and
I
not we
love
should not
it.
worry as much for what's happening on the outside.
Yeah. And also you're talking about focus, but also understanding that in the aspect of faith, right, which is a conviction for most of us, it comes also the conviction that there is a mercy, right? There is a divine order, in that we are not left alone. We're not orphaned from our Creator, our Father. That we have that. So let's go ahead and pivot, if you don't mind. Pivot now to the idea, and you brought that up already, but let's get more time with this, which the idea that education for courage specifically begins at home. You are a father of still young boys, right? How do we learn from Joanna around this idea that the courage should be developed from childhood?
I think she is big on this, right? And
Yeah.
I think she's very pragmatic in the most beautiful way because as a good educator that she is, and she
Mhm.
does not mince words because she's really coming from a place of exposing us to thought processes, right?
Yeah.
She shares with us direct guidance on how we can do it. One of the things that she says, she calls it out. She says, in the home, education for courage, right? Like in the process of education or courage at home,
Yeah.
we use the term education for courage, but in many different ways and in different passages, we could say the education of courage, right? How do
Yeah.
we educate
Yeah.
our courage? She says, it is necessary to develop the aspirations of beauty, truth, and moral victory so that life's torments and the challenges of life, I'm paraphrasing, that appear
Sure.
along the way are properly addressed with determination and willingness to overcome them. So I think the way she breaks down is, first of all, if we're doing this at home, are we pointing our little ones for now, right? Because we know that they're just mini in size, right? They carry
Yeah.
with them an incredible spiritual background that we're unaware of. When they're
Yes.
mini inside, we need to point them to the noble, to the beauty, to the truth, to aesthetics, right? which is to the great things. They need to see that from us, because childhood, as we learn in the Spirit's book, is when we have some of our shortcomings trimmed and pointed towards what's best. And after we do that, after we point them in the right direction, we need to model that, right? So we
Yeah.
need to show them that we go through these things, that we care about these things, and that the challenges of life that we face are going to be okay, because they really learn from what we do and not what we say.
Yeah.
So the question then, like, educating children in this higher sense that she proposes that we do,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
educating ourselves. There's
Yeah.
no other way around it. You
Yeah.
want to show a tiny tot how to be a better human being, like a pint-sized human, how to be a good one. You've got to, like, put your money, right, your mouth where your money is, and you can't
Yeah.
just say, you got to be kinder and not be kind yourself, because they're going to call you on it and they're going to see it.
Yeah.
So she
Yeah.
tells us, point them to the right thing, and then show them how you also value that. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it also has another question for us, Marcia,
Mm.
indirectly, which is, how do or did the models that we grew up with reflect that or not? No judgment. I'm saying,
Yeah.
like, if
Yeah.
we did not
Yeah.
have that in our homes, then it makes sense that we might not model that, right?
Yeah.
But if we want to be intentional about this, we may recognize my parents didn't bring this to the table for a lot of
Yeah.
reasons that we may not want to go into.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
choose to do the opposite. I will bring art, beauty, truth to the table, because I
Yeah.
know how good it is to have it and or lack it, right? Or how bad it is
Yeah.
to lack it. Or
And I
if they
have
did bring it, I'm going to honor that and pass it along, right?
exactly. But as you're talking about this topic of what if our families are unable to be the model for us for our lives, and there's so many fiction and nonfiction alike
Yeah.
about this topic, right? And we really, as spiritists that we are, we really understand the why, meaning that uh, my children may be much older spirits than I am, and uh, and they're here with a mission to help me become better instead of the other way around. It happens. It should not excuse us from not doing that modeling at home, but it could happen if, for example, let's say if I am. Born in and raised in a family where the language is one of violence, my
Hmm.
language most likely will be of violence,
Yeah.
right? And as such, what does it mean to break the cycle of violence, generationally speaking? And I think it's very important that we, as we are awakened to those concepts here in today in many other uh, beautiful programs available out there, to understand that even if all I know is violence, I have the right and the freedom to stop that, right?
Yes. And the agency to
So
do that, right?
yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
I think that so that level of reflection is already beautiful, right? The
Hmm.
fact that we could stop and recognize, with judgment or without judgment or with little
Hmm.
judgment, about what
Hmm.
was present or not present in our upbringing, is a great step forward. Is a wonderful, because
Hmm.
then we have the agency to decide whether we want to perpetuate that or not.
Yeah,
We're in control.
yeah.
Most of
Hmm.
us are not at that level just yet. We are just reliving that which we went through without realizing that. So that's what the process of individuation is. And then we're
Yeah,
also called to take a step further, which is, now that we know that we are not just one lifetime, what other hidden treasures, shall we say, right, await us in the realization that perhaps the language of violence that we bring is not just from this lifetime, and it's not
yeah,
just the result of our parents, but of our
yeah,
previous experiences in many lifetimes before. And that
yeah,
becomes a deeper proposition for reflection, right? Because our habits
yeah.
are not just built in our childhood and infancyhood. They are also the result of multiple lives, because now we know that we are immortal spirits. So
Yeah.
inviting that frame into the picture, whether it's for us and also for our kids,
Hmm.
because what you said there also required quite a bit of awareness to think of our kids as more than just tiny little cute
Yeah.
things, right?
Yeah.
Drive you nuts,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know? So like stepping aside from that really is as a sign that we're on the right path of thinking differently and more
Yeah.
intentionally
Yeah.
about who we are. That's
Yeah.
super hard.
Yeah.
That's super
Yeah.
hard, but it's super worth it, right?
Yeah, in the topic of teaching or, breaking that, what was imprinted into us, whatever, I think it's important for us to be reminded that, because we talked about courage against fear, right? But fearless children are not necessarily crazy, not knowing the limits or boundaries, etc. It's really about discernment, right, Dan, and resilience. So I think
Yes.
it's important for us to look as parents that you and I and most of you may be, right? Or if you're not parent, you have a role with younger ones that when we model, as you mentioned, then being calm, right? When we're going through chaos, and hey, that's what life is all about chaos, crisis, things going completely off the script, if you will. But in those moments when we can demonstrate our reasoning capabilities and our resilience and staying calm and have a more of a problem solving attitude and behavior during those you talk about the storm, right? Those
Yeah.
moments of challenges that we all go through, right?
Yeah, and I think you hit something that's very important for our kids nowadays,
Hmm.
because there's so much anxiety in our world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this anxiety for performance, like
Yeah.
the fact that we think that we got to be perfect at all times, that, social media, you only see people flying business class. They're always beautiful. Nobody's having a bad day, right?
I
You know what I'm saying?
know.
Like there is this image that we're putting out because we're so insecure about who we are and we want the acceptance. Our ego needs that tending,
Yeah.
that our kids are registering that too, and they think that they must do that. And sometimes
Yeah.
we demand that, even
Yeah.
unaware. So showing that frailty, modeling that I make mistakes too, and it's going to be okay, right? It's something that might be lacking in our society, because kids,
Yeah.
especially when they get to be a teenagers, they're under so much pressure to be perfect at everything they do. It's the
Yeah.
only time in your life where you're going to feel potentially the pressure to be
Yeah.
perfect in absolutely everything you do, right?
Yeah.
They put pressure. They got to be the best student, the best athlete, the best lover, the
Yeah.
coolest kid, right? Like when you grow up and you fall into your senses, hopefully, like you shed some of those out. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
best, but I am happy with who I am. And so
Yeah.
modeling that behavior and that acceptance of imperfection, so to speak, right,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
something that is fundamentally lacking, I think, in our society. So much so that so many of our young kids are putting so much pressure onto themselves, and we see rising numbers of suicide, of abusive,
Mhm.
self-abusive behavior, which means that we're not attentive to that. And that is
Yeah.
because we're also not tuned into that, because we're also falling prey to the same thing, right?
Yeah, being
And so
distracted, right?
it
That's
being
the root
distracted.
cause. Yeah, yeah,
And what is it that we're being distracted from? From what Joanna's calling us back to, that alignment to the things that matter. We
yeah.
are aligning yourself with the things that don't matter in the long term, right?
Mhm.
It is the old thing that Jesus tells us, right? Like, uh, store your treasures in heaven, where it cannot be stolen or the moth cannot eat it. That is, put your attention, your goals, your alignment on things that will last forever. Is the
Yeah,
Buddhist approach of impermanence, right? There
yeah,
are things that are impermanent, like the physical things are impermanent. They will not last. If we attached our attention, our love, our focus to these things, we are going to be bound to be disappointed, because they will come to an end. Our house will break down, our
yeah,
relationships will end, our money will run out, right? and we are going to be sad. Now, if I focus instead on having fun, enjoying my family in a healthy way,
Yeah,
being
yeah,
with my kids, those things are lasting. And so that alignment, again, we go back to the beginning and say the alignment to the spiritual, to the aesthetic, to the what's
yeah,
ennobling is what should gives us courage to move forward through this world of distractions and mist and illusions and gravity, right?
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. I really appreciate it. We are approaching our time to end, right? And I just wanted to ask you, invite you, are there any final thoughts that you'd like to leave with us, Dan, before we close?
I think that is what we're like. I think that the core of this, for me, the message that I take away, I often
Yeah,
ask myself, like, what is one takeaway that I take from, from an
yeah,
experience, is the importance of us aligning to that which is important to us.
yeah,
Um, can't align if we don't know what it is. To know
yeah,
what is important to us, it requires us to stop and reflect and go back to really what matters and have
yeah,
that searching
yeah,
piece that this program talks about, right? So, are we making enough time to know what we are about and what do we want? Then we can spend a significant amount of time figuring out how do we align to that. And as we align to that, I think that courage will come. So I think
yeah,
that courage for me becomes more solid and more concrete when I have a clear, more concrete view of what is it that I want for me in my life. And there are
yeah.
moments in which I forget that because the world, like you said, calls us to distractions.
They
So
do. It does. It does.
reflection
Yeah.
is key. Reflection is
Yes.
key. Let's make time to reflect. Let's
Yeah.
shift the FOMO. We even have a expression, right? Fear of missing out. The world does not
Yes.
want us to go deep. It wants us to go shallow and everywhere, right?
Yeah. And back in the day, my professional life went to many different directions, did. But back in the day, I worked with I told you architecture as a background and working with retail and retailing, the art of retail, the art of enticing, seducing you is one that is often based on anthropological studies, right? What is that makes us human beings want to do things, and boom, they come to us. And FOMO is one of those aspects that it is part of it, as in, hey, last minutes for this promotion, come, 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 and many other
Yeah.
strategies. But you said something really interesting in that science to seduce, right? All of us, it is a very shallow. It's like a deep, right? It's just very, very superficial. So it doesn't stay for much more than a minute. So let's think about it. Let's be courageous to dig deep into whatever comes at us, be a promotion, be a distraction, be boring times when we're called upon staying in silence and not watch TV or scroll in your mobile device or whatever. Let us just look at it. Let's go deep into what we need to do to find that alignment in find that purpose. I think it's beautiful that we get to talk about Joanna and her writings around courage, right? And the fact, I think my takeaway from your takeaway is that courage is something that we learn, right? And if we're having a hard time learning, we can pray for it, right? We
Yeah.
can start with small nuggets of courage and nurture it, or
Yeah.
even use acts of kindness, acts of forgiveness to teach us. Those are acts of love to have that act of resilience and the courage to be more than what we as a spirit living a human experience is going through, right?
Wonderful. And I think that once we do that, we will have those, that resolve. Maybe the word is
Yeah.
resolve, that we see in
Yes.
the heroes, right? We see in Christ going through incredible pain, that we see in Paul of Tarsus sticking to his
Yes.
goal, to see in Gandhi leading his people to freedom, and Martin Luther King staying steadfast to the idea of
Yeah.
fairness, and all these amazing leaders that we see there, be they men or women or in
Yeah.
between, who have
Yeah.
showed us that the reason why they went through such hardship and difficult things is because they were clear about what
Yes.
mattered to them. And so I think
Yes.
that's our call. Let's build that resolve. Let's practice it.
Let's do it, Dan. I'll do it. But it's unfortunately time for us to end our conversation. I want to say thank you so very much for being here with us today, Dan. Thank all of you who made it. And if this is your first time listening to a program, um, this program is a weekly talk that is released based on the works by Joanna de Ângelis, and we do hope that you are able to gather some insights from this conversation. And I want to thank our sponsors, Mansão do Caminho, the United States Spirits Federation, the International Spiritist Council, and AMI Brazil, the Brazilian arm of the Global Medical Spiritist Association. Dan, nice seeing you, and so long, everyone.